Ron DeSantis has a really good answer for a reporter asking why he's going to ban gender affirming surgeries. It's a pretty simple answer, actually, but you're going to love it. Also, Deborah Dingell, a Democrat, she doesn't have an answer when asked a very simple question about the Trump conviction. Can you tell me what the crime was? You'd think she'd have that answer. Also, Jerry Nadler gets into it with Congresswoman Hageman there in the House of Representatives about the contempt charges against Merrick Garland. Jerry Nadler doesn't have any answers either. And Nathan Wade, he's not allowed to give an answer to a CNN reporter when asked a simple question about whether he's still in a relationship with our DA Fannie down there. But everyone's at a loss for answers except Ron DeSantis. And you're going to see it all coming up right now. We are live and coming at you an hour early. I hope that doesn't throw you for a loop. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. Thanks for joining us here today. And I've neglected to ask you to subscribe to our fabulous full-length podcast so you can catch it every single time it gets uploaded daily for at least an hour as we plow through the daily news cycle from a perspective that I think you would appreciate here at Town Hall Media. Now let's go right to Ron DeSantis. He's the governor of Florida, and he was asked a question, very simple one. Microphone didn't pick it up, so I'll give you the question. Your office told us that you plan to appeal the gender-affirming ruling from yesterday. So my question today, since we're talking about the budget of taxpayer dollars, why should taxpayer dollars go to this case for the appeal? Ron DeSantis' answer.
Because it's wrong to mutilate minors. It is wrong. It is wrong to perform a sex change on a 16-year-old. You're not allowed to get a tattoo, but somehow you can have your privates cut off. Give me a break. This is wrong. And I would also say this has already been decided by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. They upheld Alabama's law, which was almost identical to Florida's law. This will be reversed. There's no question it'll be reversed. Think about it. When the founding fathers were creating the Constitution and when the first Congress passed the Bill of Rights, or even when they passed the Reconstruction Amendments in the 1860s, do you think a single person involved in that thought that there was a constitutional right to do this genital mutilation? It's ridiculous. Of course, a state can protect children against this. And we had very powerful testimony of how this is irreversible. But this idea of using tax dollars, because like the media will point out, oh, the state is spending money to do. So if you say that we shouldn't do that, you're saying that any liberal judge should be able to veto the policy of the state of Florida because they go to the same judges every time. We lose almost every time, and then we win on appeal almost every time. That's what happens. So if you're not willing to defend Florida's duly enacted statutes against liberal jurisprudence, then you're basically saying the people of Florida shouldn't govern themselves and that we should just turn over our destiny to some trial judge somewhere. That I refuse to do. We are going to stand up for duly enacted statutes. We're going to stand up for protecting the innocence of these kids. But I would say it goes beyond that, because what this is doing, when they're doing a sex change on a teenager, there's a lot of people that want to make money off that. Consequences be damned. They're lining their pockets and they could care less about what's going to happen to that teenager when they become 25, which many regret and have big time problems as a result of that. But it's also just a fact of, you use the term gender affirming care, which is what media uses and what the left uses. You're not affirming that. You're trying to change their basic biology, which you cannot do. Okay, you cannot do that. How you're born is what you are. And so I think it's about, are we going to be rooted in truth as a society or not? And if we're rooted in truth, then you would say, of course you can't do these surgeries because it's not going to take and transform somebody that's a male into a female. So we'll win that appeal. We may win it very quickly, given that the 11th Circuit has already adjudicated this case going forward. But I think that this is something that we've seen from time and time again. We do election integrity. A judge will strike it down in Tallahassee. Then we go to the appeal. We win the appeal. Here on the sex change for minors, it's already been decided on appeal, so we'll definitely win that case on appeal. So these are things that I think we're just used to, but absolutely we are going to defend the people of Florida. I am not going to turn over the destiny of this state to liberal judges.
That absolutely scores 1,000 points on various different levels in various different areas. Let's start with just the fundamentals of this, that he is protecting children from state-sanctioned and even state-funded mutilation and castration and sterilization, because the ghouls who promote these procedures, that's exactly what they end up doing to these children. They've admitted in their own words that they do it behind closed doors, but those tapes have been revealed, and that is the truth. These are not reversible procedures. It does end up sterilizing children, and if they get the surgical procedures, it ends up mutilating them for life. Perfectly healthy organs that are destroyed under the guise of gender-affirming care, which takes us to the second point, which is the reporter's use of gender-affirming care and good old Governor DeSantis calling that reporter out on it. It's the opposite of gender-affirming. It's so stupid. It's so obviously an Orwellian twisting of the language. Let me just put it in simple terms that might be able to clear whatever video streaming platform you're watching on right now, unless you're watching on Rumble, where we can say whatever the hell we want. Let's just say if you were born with one of these, that means you're a boy. And if you chop it off, that doesn't affirm your gender. It actually, well, physically reverses your gender. Although it doesn't actually. You're still a boy. You're just now a eunuch. Now, whether you chop that little thing off surgically, or if you use pharmaceuticals at heavy doses to basically shrink its effectiveness, let's say, and render it useless for how it was designed, either way, you're a eunuch. You're still a boy. Your gender hasn't changed, actually. Just your appearance and performance has changed. Which, of course, by the way, shines a light on the superficiality of those who suggest that these procedures actually do affirm somebody's gender. Because, what makes a boy a boy? What makes a girl, or a man or a woman or what have you? They bring it down to the most superficial level. See, if you've got one of these things and you chop it off, well, you're just not a boy anymore. Well, no, that's not true. For example, if I were in the military, if I'm in combat, let's say I'm a Marine. Now, just go with me for a minute. I know it's hard to believe that I would be a Marine, but I could carry it off if I had to. So let's say I'm the biggest, baddest ass United States Marine you've ever seen. Semper Fi, my friends. And let's say I'm in combat and I'm kicking butt and I am killing the bad guy left and right. I am out on the field. I've got 2 guns ablazing. I've got 1 automatic machine gun there, and I've got my pistol in my other hand, and I'm just mowing people down. And, well, fate strikes me, and a bullet comes up and shoots me right between the legs. Such a high velocity bullet, in fact, that it mutilates everything that I've got there between my legs. It's gone. It's been removed. I mean, this is a casualty that happens sometimes in war. The bullets go anywhere. And let's say this bullet on me, the baddest ass, most masculine man you've ever seen, I get a bullet to between the legs, and whatever I had between my legs there, and wasn't this, it was probably much more significant, is now gone. Am I now a woman? Am I no longer a man? Am I no longer masculine? That's how insane these people are, these activists are, and by the way, how shallow they are. It's gross. It's despicable, and good for DeSantis for calling him out on the use of that language, gender-affirming care. It's actually the opposite. You're not affirming the person's gender. You're actually physically modifying the person to appear different, but of course they're not. They're not in any way whatsoever. It brings us to the other point that he made. This argument that, well, you shouldn't use tax dollars for this appeal. So, okay, in other words, you guys can pass whatever law you want, but if you find the right judge to overturn it, that's the final say. So what's the point of having elected officials? What's the point of having a governor? What's the point of having a legislature? Why don't you just throw everything over to this judge? Oh, and this judge, by the way, is a Bill Clinton appointee, which, by the way, actually means if you were alive during the Clinton era, you know it's actually a Hillary Clinton appointee because he put her in charge of vetting a lot of these judges at the end because he was too busy with other things there in the Oval Office to worry about the petty little minutia of who to appoint to the federal bench. So he handed it off to his wife. This is a district court judge named Robert Hinkle. Robert Hinkle wrote in his opinion, striking down this ban on child mutilation under the religious banner of gender-affirming care. He said, quote, enforcing this moral view is not a legitimate state interest that can sustain the statute. That's right. He says this is really all about having a moral view. He went on to say, whether based on morals, religion, unmoored hatred, or anything else, prohibiting or impeding a person from conforming to the person's gender identity rather than to the person's natal sex is not a legitimate state interest. So, in other words, if you oppose the mutilation of children, like most of our Western nation allies now, Scandinavia, England, and the entire United Kingdom, where they have also banned this, according to this judge, you are unmoored by hatred. And obviously, Judge Hinkle, by using the terms conforming to the person's gender identity rather than to the person's natal sex, this judge, has already drank the Kool-Aid on this stuff. This person has already aligned themselves with activists' language. In fact, the judge's decision in this case sounds more like it could have been copied and pasted from the plaintiffs who were arguing on behalf of striking down this gender ban. And then finally, on the final note here, where you don't want to hand over the business of making laws to a judge, which is exactly what these reporters are suggesting. There's also the, and by the way, real fast on that, they keep getting overturned at the higher court, right? At the appeals court level or even at the Supreme Court level, where cooler heads prevail, instead of having it in the hands of a Hillary Clinton appointed judge to just decide things for the people of Florida. And this reporter suggesting, oh, you shouldn't spend tax dollars on that appeal, so let the judge's voice stand. Well, the next judge in line would actually overrule that judge if you let the actual due process of the appeals courts play out. But then there's the final thing. They make this case to the governor that you shouldn't spend tax dollars to appeal this decision. And yet this decision actually prohibits the use of tax dollars for the child mutilation. So just to understand everything, where this reporter and his allies on the far left, the radical left, stand, it's okay to use state tax dollars to mutilate children, render them sexually inoperative and infertile, sterile for the rest of their lives. It's okay to use tax dollars for that, but it's not okay to use tax dollars to get a firmly grounded constitutional legal decision on this. Like I said, every single aspect of this answer from Ron DeSantis was 1,000 points in our column. And if you'd like some bonus points, which I bet you would, the last part of this that was absolutely perfect and brilliant and needs to get wrapped up in a little package and delivered to every Republican governor across the board is the whole idea that you actually do take this fight right back to them. You don't concede their language. You don't concede the premise of their question. And you don't in any way show them any level of respect because they don't deserve it. In fact, I think one mark against Governor DeSantis is he was a little too polite in his response to this reporter, who was just trying to drive an agenda instead of actually gather news, which last I checked was actually supposed to be the job of a journalist in this country. High marks for Ron DeSantis on this across the board. And you should be looking at your own governor in whatever state you're living in right now to find out exactly why they aren't passing a law exactly like this. If you're living in a state right now where children, under the guidance of either their doctor or their school counselor or their teacher or some social worker somewhere, can decide to change their sex, their gender, their names, their clothing, their pronouns, and then get prescribed medications to alter their appearance and alter their behavior and alter their brains, you should be asking yourself why your state is allowing that and why they aren't doing exactly what Ron DeSantis did here. That's the new paradigm. That's the new bar that we should all be meeting. And you should make sure that you've got a governor who can respond to the challenges exactly like that. Speaking of challenges, can your savings weather an economic storm? Can you make it through the next downturn and the next and the next, still keeping your retirement savings intact? Think about what you put away for the future right now. Think about what form that money is in. If it's in cash, well, inflation can render cash worthless. We've seen that happen. Real estate can crash like it did in 2008. Economies built on a mountain of debt can fall like a house of cards. There are very few physical assets that you can invest in that can stand the test of time. Gold has withstood as a valued form of money for millennia. It's why people are flocking to it now and why Birch Gold is busier than ever. I love Birch Gold. They know about this little known tax loophole where Birch Gold lets you convert a retirement account into a tax sheltered IRA in physical gold. And here's the best part, it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. To learn more, text my name, Larry, Larry, to 989898. Let me say that again, 989898. Claim your free info kit on gold. Again, let me ask you, can your IRA or 401k weather an economic storm? If not, please call the people that I trust, Birch Gold. Text Larry to 989898. That's Larry, Larry, to 989898 and secure your savings today. Now, you remember the affair of Nathan Wade and Fani Willis. Fani Willis, of course, is the district attorney in Fulton County in Georgia, where she, just like her counterpart up in Manhattan, decided to take a novel approach to prosecuting the law and even interpreting the law for that matter, and brought charges of racketeering against Donald Trump, his advisors, and his lawyers with regard to their protests against the way the 2020 election was conducted in Fulton County, Georgia. She decided to prosecute all of them and throw them in jail. And this required a special prosecutor. She used tax dollars out of her budget to pay for a special outside law firm to handle this RICO case. Strangely, she hired a lawyer who has never handled a RICO case in his entire life. Now, you would think that if you were taking money from tax dollars out of the budget to hire a special counsel for something this important and this critical, prosecuting a former president in the middle of an election cycle, then on RICO charges, you would get someone who has even a bare minimum of experience prosecuting RICO cases. But she didn't do that. No, she hired Nathan Wade. And it turns out that she and Nathan Wade were, well, they were lovers. They were doing it. They were stupping. They were getting it on. They were doing the big nasty. And by the way, they were doing the big nasty. They were stupping. They were getting it on. They were wah, wah, wah. They were doing that all over the world, globetrotting. They went to Costa Rica. They went out to California. They went everywhere, all the while, doing their thing on the taxpayer dime. This became a huge objection for conflict of interest, as well as corruption and misappropriation of tax dollars. We had the hearing. They were all caught in lies under oath. And the judge walked in and said, yeah, this is bad. So one of you has to go. No, wait, if it's bad. Oh, and he left it up to them to decide. Either Willis has to step down or Wade has to step down. Now, this makes no sense. If this is a conflict of interest and misappropriation of funds, and it's wrong for them to have done this, how can only one of them get punished and the judge not decide which one gets punished? Obviously, that makes no sense. That's why Donald Trump and his fellow defendants are appealing this, and the Georgia State Court of Appeals had decided to hear that appeal, which is a sign that they're probably going to rule in favor of the former president. They're going to hear that appeal in October, which of course means this entire fiasco in Georgia is not going to be resolved before the election. All right, now you remember all of that. I brought you up to speed. Nathan Wade, the prosecutor, the guy who was taking Fonnie Willis all around the country and doing the big nasty with her, he sat for an interview with Caitlin Collins on CNN. And at one point in the interview, she asked a very simple question. When did your relationship begin? Watch what happened.
What is your current relationship with the district attorney?
Just as outlined earlier, we are great friends. We speak regularly. The conversation has changed, though. Whereas before, our conversations were about this case. I'm sure you could imagine and appreciate the amount of time that it takes that you have to pour into a case a case of this magnitude, trying to prosecute those defendants. But our conversations have shifted to how are you handling the threats that are coming your way? Are you being safe? Democracy, the case will live on, kind of thing.
Just to clarify, when did the romantic relationship between the two of you start?
Yeah, so we get into. There's been this effort to say that okay, these exact dates are at issue, and these exact.
All right, now we're going to pause there because this is when things get really interesting and pretty entertaining. But to be clear here, I just want to point out what this question was, because it's the kind of question where an immediate answer should be able to be brought forth, because the question is not an esoteric one. It's not a deeply philosophical one. It's just sort of a fact-based question. When did your relationship begin? And the answer should be, March of 2019 or December of 2023 or what have you. I mean, you're right. So as Caitlin Collins asked the question,
clarify, when did the romantic relationship between the two of you start?
Have any of you been in a relationship, a romantic relationship, a physically romantic relationship, where you don't have some kind of understanding as to when that relationship began? I mean, in other words, not to get too detailed, but after all, I've already said during this segment, when you first have a kiss with somebody that you are romantically involved with. I mean, unless you're a complete and total moral degenerate, okay, which I'm leaving open in this case. Let's face it. He is a lawyer, after all. But unless you're a complete and total moral degenerate, generally speaking, if you have a physical relationship with someone, you probably have a pretty good understanding of when it became physical, right? Like, when did you have your first kiss? When did you get to second base the first time? I'm trying to be as unspecific as possible. When did you do it? When did you, right? You know what I'm saying. When did you? Usually you remember such a thing. So it should be really easy for Nathan Wade to be able to answer it. And yet he immediately begins to obfuscate. So if somebody can't answer a question that for any other normal person, it would be really easy to answer, it tells you that they're not giving you the answer for a very good reason. Now, what that reason might be, we can sort of try to deduce, but let's watch what transpired. Again, here he is attempting to not answer the question with this answer.
Yeah. So, we get into, there's been this effort to say that, okay, these exact dates are at issue, and these exact dates are, I'm getting signaled here.
All right, so now you can see on the Chiron there that his media consultant interrupted him mid-answer, and they immediately go over and they unhook him. But they kept rolling, and I want to thank CNN. Listen, I hate CNN, and I really am not a big fan of Caitlin Collins, but I do love that they kept rolling, and then they showed this. You can see now, here is Nathan Wade with his media consultant, still on set, but just conferring there over the bookcase with, I guess, this has got to be a CNN office because it's got a Ted Turner book there on the shelf. Okay, so they come back over, Caitlin sucking in her cheeks there, and then they're ready to go.
Everything okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're all set. Again, I just want to reiterate what the question was. When exactly did your relationship with Fani Willis begin? But which, by the way, here's what makes this even more interesting, what we're about to see. He's already been asked this question under oath in a court of law, right? So the answer should be pretty consistent, unless, of course, you're a lying liar who lies. So she asked the question. He starts to ramble and meander and not give an answer. Then they have to unhook him from the setup. They keep the cameras rolling. He goes over in the corner and confers with his media consultant, who I suppose the media consultant is giving him an answer. Here's what you should say. Here's what you should say about that. And now he's back. So now let's see, after all that time and all of that work and all that effort to get the story straight and make sure that he says the right thing, let's see the brilliant answer to the question, which again, should be super simple. When did your relationship with District Attorney Fani Willis begin? Because he says not, by the way, he says right now that he's not in that relationship anymore. So he knows that it ended. So things that end, by definition, have to have a beginning, right? All right, here we go.
Just to revisit the question, it was to clarify when the romantic relationship started and when it ended.
Sure. So, I believe that the public has, through the testimony and other interviews, the public has a clear snapshot that this is clearly just a distraction. It is not a relevant issue in this case. And I think that we should be focusing on more of the facts and the indictment of the case.
Well, I ask because obviously it's still a pending matter. It's going to be before the Court of Appeals. And you talked about how proud you were of all the work that you did in this office. And I think the question that people have when they hear from the Court of Appeals, this isn't happening until next spring, is did the relationship jeopardize that work that you did in this investigation? And
therein lies the issue, why we wouldn't touch upon the work of the Court of Appeals or some higher court, because it's a pending issue before them. Think that we should allow them, take a step back and allow them to take the evidence that they have and do their work, make the decision.
Right. But you did testify to this and you were asked on the stand about when it started and when it ended. It just wasn't completely clear because before it said before the indictment, which was August 15th here in Atlanta. And then later the answer was at the end of that year. And so I think that was the clarity that people were seeking of when it started and when it ended.
Sure. And there again, there's a question before the court. And that is the crux of the question. I don't choose to say or do anything that would jeopardize the case or the court's ruling. I prefer to allow them to make their decision based upon what they have and accept it.
So let me just translate that for you. Caitlin, I'd love to answer that question, but if I gave you an answer, it would completely and totally screw me over. Because I could tell you the truth, and then everything gets blown up. And we're not able to prosecute Donald Trump, which is really all that matters because we're trying to interfere in the election. And if I lie to you and I don't tell you the truth, well, then I'm going to be in big trouble with the courts as well, or with public opinion, because I'm sure there's evidence out there that will show exactly when the relationship began. In fact, there's already public testimony that shows when the relationship began, and I'm already kind of screwed with that. So if I give you any kind of answer, I continue to be screwed, so I'm just not going to answer you at all. But it took them that long to get into the corner and confer and come up with that. And I got to say, Caitlin Collins is being incredibly generous, let's just say, with Mr. Wade here. I would have probably conducted the interview a little bit more aggressively. Caitlin, get off the Adderall.
Do you believe, as you reflect on this, that your relationship with the district attorney was a mistake?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What I believe is this whole conversation is a distraction. That's all. It's a tool to stop the train, to slow down the inevitable, which is the trial of the defendants named in the election interference case.
Do you believe the trial ultimately happens?
Absolutely. Absolutely it happens.
Mr. Wade, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Job well done, you two. That is great. Congratulations. Oh, gosh, I have so many other questions that I would have loved to have asked. I don't get Nathan Wade to come and sit down with me for an interview. I guess we know why now. I wouldn't be so friendly. Do you think it was a mistake? Absolutely not. No, really, because you're a complete and total punchline across the nation right now. And because of the relationship, you've single-handedly completely spiked this and, by the way, helped Donald Trump prove his point. So I'm just curious. We know that Donald Trump's approval with black voters in America, it continues to rise, especially black men. Is that a MAGA tie you're wearing? Because honestly, I think you're on Trump's side the way this is all going down. You have given him the biggest gift anybody could possibly have given him in this entire prosecution of Fulton County. That's something to behold. And the fact that they had to stop everything, unplug, disengage, go over the quarter, confer. Kayla Cohen's sitting there sort of, what do we do? And comes back and says, yeah, this whole question as to whether when the relationship began, that's just a distraction. You know, when people say this is a distraction, they are actually trying to distract you. You see, this isn't a distraction. This is the crux of the argument and the appeal right now. That, in fact, these two, Mr. Wade and Ms. Willis, have conducted gross violations of legal ethics against the defendant here. And last I checked, our system of justice in this country is actually supposed to protect the rights of the accused from a corrupt and unethical, powerful government prosecutor using the law to punish the accused. And may I just say, even if the accused is guilty. Now, I don't believe Donald Trump is guilty of anything that they're saying he's guilty of in Fulton County. But understand this critically important element of the American judicial system, the American criminal justice system. You could have arrested a murderer with literal blood on his hands and a literal smoking gun in his hand and have a completely verified video of that murderer murdering his victim without any shadow of a doubt. But if in the course of prosecuting that murderer caught red-handed with a smoking gun, the government, through its prosecutors, conduct themselves in an illegal, unethical, and immoral way, then you have to throw out the prosecution. Because we set up a system that bends over backwards to protect the accused. And for Democrats in 2024, when the accused name is Donald J. Trump, all of that gets pushed through the shredder because none of that matters. The only thing that matters is doing whatever they can to defeat that man and keep you from being able to vote for him. But see, this is why I don't get Nathan Wade for an interview. Sorry. Now, I live in Washington, D.C., and I report on D.C. politics. That means reporting on Capitol Hill a lot of the time, House of Representatives and the Senate. And I'm a bit of a nerd about this stuff. I think the House of Representatives is fascinating and frustrating at the same time. And one of my favorite committees is one that nobody ever talks about, that gets hardly any coverage at all. It's the House Rules Committee. But if you ask anyone who knows anything about what goes down in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill and the House of Representatives, they will tell you that the most powerful and most important committee is the Rules Committee. This is where they lay out the rules for any piece of legislation or any sort of special hearing or any major motion on the floor. First, you lay out the rules for the debate and for the vote, and then you go to the business of the debate and the vote. It's in the Rules Committee where things are decided, sometimes before it ever even makes it to the floor. You can see where things are headed based on how the Rules Committee goes. Also, two other reasons why I love the Rules Committee. It's where members of Congress are probably their most candid as they start ripping each other's throats out because they really do hate each other. And number two, it's one of the smallest rooms that they have hearings in. So everybody's in tight, cramped quarters, and it doesn't feel as made for television. It feels more real. It feels more raw. And it certainly felt that way 2 days ago in the Rules Committee as they were discussing the rules for the debate and vote over the what we saw yesterday, holding Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. Jerry Nadler asked a very, very good question that he immediately regretted asking. And it had to do with, hey, I keep hearing people say that this prosecution of Donald Trump in Manhattan was unfair and improper. I mean, what was unfair about it? And then watch what happened next.
The gentlelady from Wyoming a moment ago said that there were clear differences between the way the Hunter Biden trial was conducted and the legitimacy of that trial and the illegitimacy of the Donald Trump trial in New York. Maybe she'd enlighten us as to the difference.
I'm happy to have that debate
Please.
with you any day of the week,
Please.
but I just don't think that that's relevant to what we're
Well, you
discussing.
brought it up. So
I mean,
why
we
don't
can,
you
we
explain
can
it?
start with.
You said it was
the judge.
absurd.
Now, this is Harriet Hageman, by the way. You know her because she beat Liz Cheney by about 30 points in her primary after the January 6th Select Committee back in 2022. She's awesome. She's a freshman, by the way, and she's absolutely kicking booty as the representative for Wyoming. And I want you to recognize here, because Nadler says, oh, you keep saying that it was big differences and it was unfair what happened to Donald Trump. I'd love for you to. And she's actually giving him an out. She's actually saying, and I know from your point of view, it sounds like she's weaseling out of it, right? Oh, I'd love to answer your question, but I don't think it's relevant here, right? Which is oftentimes a dodge. But in fact, in this case, I think it was kind of a bait and switch. I think it was to suck Jerry Nadler into this. I'd love to tell you what was wrong with the trial against Donald Trump up in Manhattan, but I don't think it's relevant here. And then Jerry Nadler insists. And watch what Harriet Hageman does.
Wait, hold on, Miss Hag.
All
Miss
right,
Hageman.
we can start with the judge that was handpicked rather than randomly chosen, which is typical in most of your court cases. You can talk about the fact that you talked about unanimity of verdict. We don't even know what the verdict was at this point in terms of what he was allegedly convicted of unanimously. We can talk about the fact that almost every single ruling that was made by Judge Merchan in New York was against the defense, despite the fact that when you're dealing with a criminal case, there's either typically much more of a balance, or in fact to ensure that the prosecution actually meets its burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt, most of the rulings would be in favor of the criminal defendant, not in favor of the prosecution. It's in the fact that the expert witness, who is the federal election, former head of the Federal Election Commission, was excluded from testifying as an expert witness in the case in New York, despite the fact that he has been qualified as an expert witness to testify on these matters throughout the entire United States. It is the fact that there were other witnesses that were excluded. There was a substantial evidence, prejudicial evidence that was admitted during the course of the trial. And then when you look at what happened with Hunter Biden, the prosecution was very precise, very specific about the nature of the statute that was at issue and how he violated it. And then they brought in the evidence from the family members, the ex-wife, the girlfriend, the Beau's widow, the young girlfriend, all of the testimony, him reading the book, all of the testimony. The evidence was overwhelming that Hunter Biden had violated the specific statute at issue. So there's dramatic differences in terms of how the New York case was handled versus how the case against Hunter Biden was handled. If you'd like to spend another 3 or 4 hours, we can go outside and I can give you additional evidence to that effect.
All right,
Can I just say, you got to you see that man sitting next, see the smile on Jim Comer's face. James Comer, the chairman of the Oversight Committee, who sat there during that whole thing. It took 2 minutes. And look at James Comer's smile. He's like, I love this woman. Oh, if I weren't a happily married man. There was something so epic about that. And she's like, I'm just getting started. You want more? I got more. Let's go outside. Let's take it outside. Don't ask questions, Jerry Nadler, if you're unprepared to actually get the answer. Now, that's just one highlight of this remarkable Rules Committee 2 days ago. Now, spoiler alert, they ended up voting to hold Merrick Garland in contempt. And I want to take you to another part of the debate in the Rules Committee, because again, everyone's there in tight, close quarters, and they're going at it about whether they should move forward with this hold Merrick Garland in contempt. And you're going to hear the crux of it here. The reason that Merrick Garland was held in contempt of Congress is because Congress subpoenaed a piece of evidence from the Justice Department, and Merrick Garland has withheld it under dubious executive privilege reasons. And let me just be clear on what this is. This is the audio of Joe Biden's interrogation at the hands of the special counsel, Robert Hur, over Joe Biden's criminal mishandling of classified documents. You will remember that Mr. Hur found that he had, in fact, mishandled classified documents and violated the law, but because of his mental incapacity, he would not be able to stand trial and a jury would not be able to convict him, so they decided not to bring charges. Now, the Justice Department has produced a transcript of that interview, of that interrogation. So by presenting the transcript, they've already waived their executive privilege because whatever occurred in that interview is supposed to be on that transcript. So now Congress says, okay, well, we want the audio so we can match it up against the transcript. And now Merrick Garland's saying, no, you can't have that because of executive privilege. It's an outrageous false use of executive privilege. And that's why he's being held in contempt. So now watch how the debate went forward.
The actual audio of the interview available. Let the American people be the deciders here.
Because
why hide that from them?
Because
People are sensitive because they were told that, say, a certain laptop was Russian disinformation, and 51 members of the intelligence community signed a letter to that effect, and then it turns out, well, maybe it was not.
Because the chairman.
Yeah, and I'll let you finish, but that's such an important point that you don't hear made enough. Because the Democrats, Jerry Nadler, Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, you know, the corrupt powers that be, their argument here is, we gave you the transcript. Trust us. And the answer is, yeah, last time you told us to trust you, you said the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. So forgive me for not being gullible again. That honestly should be the beginning, middle, and end of this debate. But it went on. But that's a critically important point made there.
Of the Judiciary Committee has already been caught altering.
May I respond?
No,
Yeah.
not until I finish. Has been caught altering verbal, electronic transcripts in the case of Nina Jankowicz, and we have every reason to believe, or let me retract that.
Yeah.
We have no reason to believe that he wouldn't do so again.
If I may respond.
Please, I wish you would.
That is absolutely untrue. Neither Jim Jordan nor anybody on the Judiciary Committee made any changes to Nina Jankowicz's interview transcript. That's absolutely a false statement. There's one other point that I think needs to be clarified, which is that Special Counsel Robert Hur stated on page 1 of his report, our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a vice president. The reason that he recommended against prosecuting President Biden was not a gratuitous statement. It was the reason as to why he refused to recommend prosecution. And it was that because Joe Biden is a, quote, sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, Mr. Hur was concerned that a jury would not be willing to convict. Anyone who wants to see what Mr. Hur actually found and his explanation of what he did, you can go and you can watch the hearing before the Judiciary Committee. But one thing is very clear, and I will go back to it again. The folks on the other side of the aisle keep wanting to say the transcript and the audio are identical. There is no reason why, if you have the transcript, you're entitled to the audio. As a long practicing attorney, they are not the same thing. The audio is the best evidence of what he said, how he said it, the time that it took for him to say it, and in what ways they may have altered that transcript. The moment that they released the transcript and said, this is the interview, they waived their ability to claim any kind of a privilege. And they don't have a legally valid privilege in addition to that. And it's for that reason that we believe that Merrick Garland needs to be held in contempt of Congress.
Holy moly, she is good. I mean, really good. The people of Wyoming talk about an upgrade from Liz Cheney. And let's just reiterate something that was just said, because the whole justification for not bringing criminal charges against Joe Biden or recommending criminal charges against Joe Biden from the special counsel over his criminal mishandling of classified documents, which, as you heard right there on page 1 of Robert Hur's report, he confirmed that Joe Biden was guilty of criminal mishandling of classified documents. The only rationale for not bringing charges or recommending to bring charges is because of his performance in this deposition, because of the way he came across, his inability to answer questions, his inability to remember basic facts like the year his son died. It compelled the U.S. attorney acting as a special prosecutor in this case to recommend that charges not be brought. So it's not just what he said, it is how he said it, the manner in which he said it. That is an incredibly compelling piece of foundational evidence to back up what the special counsel recommended here. And we, the people, you better damn well believe that we have every right to hear it. And the second they allowed that transcript out, there is literally what executive privilege doesn't extend to the actual content of what you're saying. Executive privilege is only there to protect people from hearing you say it. We can read you saying it, but we can't hear you saying it. I'd love for a judge to rule on that executive privilege claim. It's complete and utter nonsense. That's right, I said utter nonsense. I was going to say total. Then I said utter. It came out utter. Nobody's nerfed. All right, we continue here with the rebuttal from Mr. Nadler.
I firmly believe
I will agree with her. I will agree.
Gentleman will suspend. I firmly believe that the American people are entitled to hear this, and I'm grateful that you brought this today. I'll give you a chance to respond, Mr. Nadler, but then we need to move on to
I will agree with Ms. Hageman that there is no evidence that the transcript was altered whatsoever. The transcript wasn't altered. But in Ms. Hageman, I'm sorry, Ms. Jankowicz's case, the transcript wasn't altered, the video was altered.
Yeah.
And that's what we're concerned about.
We're not arguing the Jankowicz case. We're arguing.
No, but if the Judiciary
The
Committee
American people
was
deserve the
dishonest
ability
enough-
to see that and make this
if the
decision on
dis-
their own. They are sick and tired of being lied to
if the
by
di-
agencies.
if the
Yeah, they're sick and tired of being lied to, and they're sick and tired of Democrats like Jerry Nadler trying to protect us. The American people shouldn't be able to see this because somebody might, put together a mashup reel of all of Joe Biden's utter failures, and you might reach the conclusion that his brain is actually made of mashed potatoes. And we can't have that. Well, spoiler alert, yesterday, after that debate in the Rules Committee, which again, are you with me? Do you not love the Rules Committee? They ended up holding Merrick Garland in contempt. However, what that means is they then take that recommendation for criminal charges and they give it to the Justice Department. Now, in the last Congress with the Democrat majority, they held Stephen Bannon in contempt and Peter Navarro in contempt, and the Justice Department then pressed criminal charges. They convicted them, and now they're sentencing them to jail. In this case, Merrick Garland now, who oversees the Justice Department, he has decided that he will not hold himself in contempt. And he won't step aside and let somebody else make that judgment. He will let an independent third party make that judgment. In fact, he's relying on a memo that was drafted by the Justice Department to advise him on this. So let's just be clear. Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, has been held in contempt of Congress. And in evaluating whether Merrick Garland should be brought up on criminal charges for that contempt, Merrick Garland, the person who would make that decision about his own contempt of Congress, consulted his own employees and had his own employees draft a memo advising him on whether he should or should not hold himself in contempt. Okay? Did you follow that? And Merrick Garland also assures you that there is no politicization of the Justice Department, that everyone is treated fairly under the law, and that there's absolutely no bias in any of the decisions that they make. Just trust him. Just him. When has he ever led you down the wrong path? Debbie Dingell. She's a congresswoman from Michigan, and her district is a very interesting one. I actually grew up in this district. Wayne County, Oakland County, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. You would think, oh, well, it's got to be Democrat. Actually, not so fast. In fact, in the last presidential elections from 2000, this district has voted for the Republican nominee every single time, except in 2008 for Barack Obama. This district, Debbie Dingell, the Democrat in the 6th congressional district in Michigan, this district voted for Bush twice in 2000 and 2004, voted for Romney in 2012 over Obama, and voted for Trump both times in 2016 and 2020. Why is that relevant? Well, it explains why Debbie Dingell is one of the few Democrats in the House of Representatives that actually goes on a cable news network that begins with the letters FOX. In this case, it was Fox Business with Maria Bartoromo. And they discussed the charges against Merrick Garland in holding him in contempt. Debbie Dingell, of course, being a Democrat, voted against it and wanted to make the case why this was all just a politicization of the law in our country. And it's got to stop. We've got to stop politicizing the law. Whereupon Maria Bartoromo said, oh, honey, I agree. Let's talk about how the law has been used as a political weapon, shall we? And, well, watch how Debbie Dingell squirms.
Welcome back. The House holding Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress over his refusal to hand over the Biden-Hur audio. I spoke with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, just moments ago, and why he wants that audio. Watch.
We know that this White House heavily edits things that President Biden says, and they have a history of that. And so we have a responsibility of oversight to ensure that what Robert Hur did and what the decision that he made not to prosecute, what's obviously clear violations of the law, was justified, and that the transcript that they gave us matches the audio. That's a very simple issue, and we are certainly entitled to the information that's being sought.
Joining me now is Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, a member of the House Energy and Commerce and Natural Resources Committees, as well as the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic. Congresswoman, great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining me. Your reaction to what you just heard and to this vote?
We're going to hear her reaction in a moment, but I'm sorry. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that Debbie Dingell is clearly being styled, dressed, and presented by the same people who are working with Jill Biden. What in God's name? What is that? A sofa upholstery that she's wearing? Is that like one of those blankets that your grandma would put over her favorite chair when the grandkids came over? What the hell is that? And literally, I mean, her hair is the same as Jill Biden, too. Is she trying to catch Joe's eye? Is it just women of that era that decide to dress like this? I'm sorry. I know it's petty. It's dismissive of an accomplished woman in the professional world, and I shouldn't be demeaning her by criticizing her appearance, but I'm not nearly as respectable as you think I should be. When you say, "Oh, Larry, you're better than that." Oh, no, I'm not. I'm not even close to being better than that. I am right down there in the gutter. You betcha I am. I'm sorry, if you're a woman in politics and in the news and you're going on television, don't dress like you're wearing the upholstery of a sofa. It's embarrassing. Maria, by the way, very well put together. Debbie Dingell. All right. Now to the substance.
Look, I think that yesterday's vote is a continued politicization of going after various secretaries. I actually have a great deal of respect for our Attorney General. I do not think he was playing games. I think there was an investigation. He did not find cause. Republicans didn't like the outcome. And I would really ask us, Maria, on all sides, we had to stop. We had to take a deep breath and stop politicizing people that are in public service. This is a gotcha moment, really. It's not going to go anywhere. We need to be working together on a lot of bipartisan issues that need us working together.
Yeah. Okay, so now I just set this up for you, but let me reiterate. She is running for re-election. The Dingell family, by the way, she inherited this seat from her deceased husband, right? Her husband held this. The Dingell family has held this congressional seat for something like 60 or 70 years, okay? And Debbie Dingell is up for re-election. She wants to hold on to power, and she knows, what is it, June? This is June of 2024, and she knows that in November, her voters are going to go and vote, and they are probably going to vote for Donald Trump for president. And then as they go down the line, she wants them to jump over a column to the Democrats to vote for her. So now she's got to present to her voters, oh, we're just so sick and tired of people politicizing the law and dragging good people like Merrick Garland into politics. He's just a good public servant who's trying to do the best job as an attorney general. We've got to get past all of this disagreement and this vitriol. We got to work together to solve the country's problems. You see, this is the game she's playing here. But Maria Bartoromo now reminds her that she's a Democrat. And she's in the party that's done all of this to us, that's dragged us all into this morass. Here we go.
So a lot of problems.
And I think a lot of people feel that way. I agree with you on some level for sure. But have you told the FBI that? I mean, do you think that there's been a political attack on President Trump since he first entered Washington in 2015?
I think that.
What's the answer?
You know, I have to say this to you.
What's the answer? Has President Trump been attacked politically because he's President Trump? Because he's Trump, has he been attacked politically?
Well,
and it's unfair.
I think there are a lot of political attacks on a lot of people.
No, I'm asking about Donald
President Trump.
What about Trump?
Well, President Trump does some things that I have had issues with. You know it. The two of us have had interesting spars, but we do it directly with each other.
What specifically?
I think he does some things. I think the way that he goes after people, I think the way that.
Let me translate what you just said. Donald Trump is a meanie face, and he says mean things that I don't like, and he tweets nasty stuff. So you bet your ass they should throw him in jail. Because he goes after people. So yes, we're going to invent law to prosecute him because he should be jailed because he says mean things to me, and I don't like it. That's what she's saying. That's all she's got. I mean, you would think that if she were a smart Democrat and she was challenged on the politicization of the law in the way that Maria Bartoromo just did and said, well, what about Donald Trump? I mean, you say they're using the law as a political weapon against Merrick Garland. What about Donald Trump? And if she were smart, Debbie Dingell, which I'm afraid she's not, if she were smart, she should have said, oh, Maria, it's a very different situation. Clearly, Donald Trump broke the law. So in that case, that's not politicization. But she couldn't do that. She couldn't even do that because she knows it's not true. So she immediately went to, well, you know, I disagree with a lot of things that Donald Trump does, and I think that he's really mean the way he goes after people. She's proving the point. She's proving the point. Why did they go after Donald Trump criminally and they want to throw him in jail? Why did they prosecute him in that courtroom? Well, because we disagree with a lot of the things he does, and the way he goes after people is really wrong. Can you believe this? She's actually conceding the point. Now, then maybe somebody talks to her in her ear and tells her, no, get back to breaking the law.
He sometimes twists the facts.
Right, but
I wish.
But I'm asking about that on him.
He was
the
convicted of 34 counts in a court of 34 counts of a felony in a due process by a jury of his peers.
What was the crime? What was the crime, Congresswoman?
What was the crime?
Yeah.
The crime was that he lied to people. He manipulated payments that were being made. He violated the law in terms of why was he making these payments.
What was the crime? And the answer is he violated the law. So she's had 3 goes at it. And I think you know more about this case than Debbie Dingell does, or she knows full well and she just can't concede the truth. She had 3 goes at it. What was the crime? The first one was he lied to people, which may be wrong, but it's not a crime and something that he was never charged with. The second was manipulating payments. What does that even mean? And by the way, nobody claimed that the payments that he made to his lawyer was manipulated. They claimed that he misaccounted it as a legal fee when it wasn't a legal fee. And what was the third thing? Just violated the law with regard to, hang on.
What was the crime?
Yeah.
The crime was that he lied to people. He manipulated payments that were being made. He violated the law in terms of why was he making these payments.
No, what does that mean? Actually, I think that that's the same thing as manipulated payments, but No, that's not the question. Of course, as you know, everything that she just laid out there with regard to the accounting of legal fees as the payments to his lawyer, that's a misdemeanor and past the statute of limitations. The only way that the prosecutor, Mr. Bragg, up in Manhattan, was able to bring these charges as a felony is if it was tied to a secondary crime, that he was doing those things to hide a second crime. And of course, that's the real question, is what was that crime? And literally no one can tell you what it was, including Debbie Dingell. Now, understand, she invited this line of inquiry because she said that they shouldn't hold Merrick Garland in contempt because the American people are sick and tired of the politicization of law in this country. We should stop using the law as a weapon. And Maria Bartoromo merely asked, well, do you make the same case for Donald Trump and what they're doing to him? And she is absolutely splayed out here. She is being roasted on a 700-degree Weber grill, propane, not natural gas. She is, and we're only halfway through this.
Do you see any similarity? Do you see any similarity to the 51 intelligence officials who lied about the Hunter Biden laptop right before the 2020 election, calling it Russian disinformation?
Hunter Biden, by the way, we have a problem on all sides with Russian disinformation. So I'm never going to downplay. I think
but specifically the Hunter Biden laptop was real. They signed a letter saying that it was Russian disinformation. Convicted. Is that a similar situation to what President Trump was just convicted of?
Hunter Biden was in a court and convicted.
No, that was gun charge. That was a very separate situation, different situation. I'm talking about the Hunter Biden laptop. Right before the 2020 election, 51 intelligence officials signed a letter saying it was Russian disinformation. They hid the truth before the election. Is that similar to what Trump was just charged with?
You know, there's an investigation going into that laptop. I don't have the facts. I think you're going to hear a lot more about this laptop in the coming months. I'm not privy, Maria, and about what was on there, what wasn't.
Right.
What
no,
happened.
I'm just asking if it's a similar.
Whoa. Color me paranoid, color me suspicious. Maybe I'm overreacting this, but did you just hear what I just heard? Let's listen to it together one more time, because I think that was a really interesting thing. Maria Bartoromo obviously pointing out the fact that intelligence agents, 51 of them, meddled in the 2020 election by claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop was misinformation, Russian disinformation, in fact. And what did Debbie Dingell just say about that laptop?
Laptop in the coming months. I'm not privy.
Hold on. Let me start it a little earlier.
You know, there's an investigation going into that laptop. I don't have the facts. I think you're going to hear a lot more about this laptop in the coming months.
Look at Maria. She's got the same look I've got right now. Did you just hear what I heard? What do you mean we're going to hear a lot more about this laptop in the coming months? What exactly are you getting at? You know, I've been making the case to you for many months now that Joe Biden will not be the nominee for the Democrats. I went on a limb. I really do believe it. I believe that as his poll performance continues to deteriorate, Democrats are getting very, very nervous. I mean, very nervous. And Democrats only care about one thing. They don't care about Joe Biden. They don't care about him. They don't care about his family. They don't care about, they care about winning. They care about retaining power. And if Joe Biden being on the ticket stands in the way of them retaining power, Joe Biden will be gone. The only question is how. And now did you hear that? I'm just going to put a marker on this, put a bookmark on this. Debbie Dingell may have spoken a little out of turn there. See, Debbie Dingell is one of those people who is like, Joe Biden's killing us here. Because again, I want to reiterate, she's in a district that just voted for Donald Trump in the last two elections. She's one of those Democrats. She is vulnerable. She is in trouble. If it weren't her last name, she would have already lost re-election many times over. And she just said, and look at Maria's face, because she heard the same thing I heard. I have a feeling you'll be hearing about that laptop quite a bit more in the coming months. There is an ongoing investigation. interesting, to say the least. All right, a little bit more.
I'm not privy, Maria, and about what was on there, what wasn't.
Right.
What
No,
happened,
I'm just asking if
and
it's
I
a
don't
similar
speculate.
situation. Is it a similar situation that people hid truth before the election in 2020 about Hunter Biden, and now Trump was just charged with, I guess, hiding truth ahead of an election about a $130,000 payment he made to a porn star? Is it
I
the
think
same?
that, first of all, I don't have all the facts, so I'm careful.
I'm sorry?
I think I don't have all the facts. I think a lot of people were looking for facts, didn't know what the Biden computer was. I still don't know. I think this Trump
still don't
trial
know what?
happened after I don't know all the facts related to this. I read lots of stuff.
Well, I know that the DOJ used the laptop as evidence in the gun trial against Hunter Biden. So they obviously looked at the laptop. They said that it is real. And we knew that it was real at the time, but 51 intelligence officials said it wasn't. They lied.
So do you understand what Maria is setting up here? Because Debbie Dingell and the Democrats and all of them, their claim about the criminal charges against Donald Trump is it wasn't just that he hid the payments to Stormy Daniels, but he did it to deceive the American people so that they would vote for him. Because if they knew the truth about those payments, they wouldn't vote for him. And that meddled in the election. That's what Debbie Dingell's trying to say here. And all Maria Bartoromo is saying is, okay, let's accept your premise for a moment. 51 intelligence agents lied to the American people and told us that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. If the American people knew that it was in fact authentic, which we now know it is, then they would have voted for Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden. That would have altered the election. So if Donald Trump is guilty of criminal charges upwards to 25 years in prison for what you claim he did, how are these intelligence agents also not guilty of the exact same thing? I mean, the exact same thing. And it's a brilliant, brilliant jujitsu move because there's no legitimate answer other than, well, because this was our guy, not Trump. So, you know, that's different, which, by the way, is the only reason. That's the only legitimate answer, except it's completely illegitimate.
Well, I don't have the letter in front of me. Look, nobody's above the law. I want to make that really clear. Nobody. The rule of law needs to work in this country. We've seen it twice now in the last month. People have been convicted. And I want to know that the rule of law works. Nobody. And I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat or who they are, wherever. The rule of law is a very important
I totally agree with
fact in our country.
I totally agree. Do you think President Trump has been treated fairly in these last 6 years?
Yeah, I do. I think that media on both sides can go after people, but I think Donald Trump's brought on a lot of his own problems, quite frankly. Yeah.
There you go. All right. See, Donald Trump is mean and he says mean things and he tries to fire people that we are relying on in the deep state to get our job done. Even when we don't vote for things, we just make sure that our agenda is carried out. And because of that, he's brought on his own problems. You remember Chuck Schumer said it. You mess with the intelligence community and the CIA, they have 6 ways to Sunday to get back at you. And so here we are. Debbie Dingell trying her best to polish a turd. And let me just be clear, during that entire interview that you just saw, she kept repeating one thing over and over again. And it is 100% undeniably true. She said it. I'll quote her. I don't have the facts. Amen. You don't. You're an absolute ignoramus moron. And I hope the people of her district saw this. In fact, if you live anywhere in Michigan or if you've got friends in Michigan, make sure you share this over with them so they can see exactly how their representative conducted herself and so that they can see their own hometown guy here, Larry, give some analysis. Hey, Michigan, go blue. We are out of time. That's it for this time. We'll be back next time, though. And in the meantime, I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.